Well, thank you all for making time to be with us this afternoon. My name is Blake Thomas. I'm the manager of our Postdoctoral Scholars Program. If we have not had a chance to meet, welcome, and hopefully we'll be able to do that here before too long. This is our second event in this series. It is What I Wish I Had Known When I Was a Postdoc. Our guest speaker today is Jason Aimone from the Economics Department over in the Business School. He has experience as both a postdoc and as a mentor of postdocs, so he has been on both sides of this equation. And we look forward to hearing from him. We're going to let him present for just a few minutes, and then we'll open up the floor for any questions at the conclusion. So, Dr. Aimone, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Blake and Stacy, for inviting me to talk to the postdocs. It's a very interesting position to have in academia. And so I had a postdoc back before I got to Baylor. So I was, Baylor is my first tenure track professorial position that I had, but I did have the postdoc ahead of time. And it's something that's a little unusual for economists. So I'm in the economics department in the business school, and we have very few postdocs, if any postdocs, typically in the business school. I do have a postdoc now, Stanton, who's on here as well. And we've had a couple throughout time in the business school, but it's not the most common thing. But the postdoc that I had was actually in somewhat of a more natural science type environment. I had a neuroeconomics postdoc. So I actually was embedded within a neuropsychology department environment at Virginia Tech. So I have a little experience in the type of position that you all are in. So I was kind of asked to just talk a little bit about what I would have liked to have known when I went into my postdoc, and kind of what I learned and what I think might be helpful for y'all. And this is a fairly short thing, so I'm not going to be long-winded here, but hopefully I have some thoughts that maybe you haven't heard from your own mentors, and happy to answer some questions afterwards. So there's not a particular order of importance to what I'm going to be talking about. It's just kind of just various things that I was thinking about. I think the key first thing to remember is that you are involved in a marathon, not a sprint. So with your graduate degrees, when you're going and working on your Ph.D. and trying to write that dissertation, you had this kind of goal in mind, and you had one project you were working on, and you're like, I got to get this dissertation done. You have 2 or 3 years to work on it, and you're really focused on this narrow project or set of projects. When you start your postdoc, you start entering into this world of academia that professors are in, where you're involved in a lot more things. It's typically not just one single thing you're working on anymore. And it's easy if you want to try to spend the amount of time every day working on every one of your projects that you did as a PhD student, you're going to get exhausted very rapidly. And you may not sleep as much as you should. You may think, hey, I can pull an all-nighter again and work on this project. But if you wear yourself too thin, you're not going to do as well as you could. You don't want to be sleeping 10 hours a night, probably, unless you really have to. But you don't want to be doing 4-hour nights on a regular basis, probably, because you'll burn out. And your postdoc is kind of a stressful time because you're temporary. You're not going to be at the university for 20 years. You are really focused on just a narrow few years that you're a postdoc to be very productive. But you have to kind of manage that time very well. So make sure you sleep. That said, you can't get lazy and sleep too much and relax too much and things like that, because you do have this publish or perish mentality probably that has been embedded in you for a while. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. Don't forget about your dissertation. You're jumping into new projects, you're excited about them, you've been working on your dissertation for 3 years maybe, and you're excited to do new things. But with that, you have to realize you don't have as much time probably. Different disciplines, so your postdoc's going to last a different amount of time. But you have a couple of years at most to try to publish as much as you can in order to get your tenure track assistant professor job somewhere. And the best source of an immediate publication you have is that dissertation. So you want to make sure you can somehow convert that into some academic publications, as many as you can feasibly out of your single dissertation. So I would suggest you take a little time, if you haven't already, talk to your postdoc mentor about your dissertation and say, I want to get this out. Here's how much time I think I need to work on that. And have that kind of established as, I need a little bit of time to work on trying to polish up, present if you need to, and get that dissertation out the door so you can do things. And that's going to be critical for you in getting a job. Secondly, you need to talk with your mentor about time that you can work on things outside of the main project that you are working on in your postdoc here at Baylor. Now, your mentor has hired you to work on specific things, and that's good, and that's going to be a wonderful thing for you. But when you're out on the job market, people are going to want to see your creativity, your inspiration, your ideas, and they want to know that you are a unique individual academic, and that's a good thing. But in order to do that, you can't just ride on your mentor's coattails the whole time. You need to show that innovation you have yourself. So what I would suggest is talk to your mentor about what percentage of time they think would be good and useful for you to work on kind of outside projects, I would call it. So I know with, I've had 2 postdocs while I've been a professor here at Baylor, and I build into my advertisements for my postdocs that they will have a specific amount of time to work on their own projects. Now, different fields, that number could vary a great deal. Some postdocs are very open and it's like, go forth and be productive. Other postdocs are, I have this specific project, I need this stuff done. And it might be harder to carve out time to work on these outside projects. But that is a critical thing of development that you need to demonstrate, most likely for your field, that you are a unique academic and can stand alone. Because as an assistant professor, you're not going to have somebody guiding you. So you need to demonstrate that independence a little bit. Your mentor, they are probably your biggest proponent here at Baylor and anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, really, as far as your academic career. They are as invested in you as you are in them. They want a long-term co-author. They want someone that they can write with, write papers with, do great work in the future, even outside of your time as their postdoc. So they want you to get a really good job. So they're going to be invested in you trying to develop into that person who can go out and get a really good one. So they are interested in your work outside of your own projects with them as well. So keep that in mind. But you're being paid by a grant or you're being paid by the professor. So you want to make sure you don't just take half a week working on your own projects because you know it's important. You need to have that conversation with them up front. And that will help your relationship with them, I think, and help you manage your time very well. Conferences are very important as well. You may be tired from your PhD, you've done a lot, you're calm from the job market, all the interviews are done, and you may want to take a break from the conference scene. I found as a postdoc that conferences were really, really important, even more so than as a PhD student, because your time horizon is very short as a postdoc, and you need to go and network, you need to meet people. It's much harder to reject somebody on the job market if they know your face, if they've talked to you, they've had a conversation with you, and they know you're a good person and you're smart. So the only way to do that, though, is to meet people and show them and demonstrate your intelligence, your work, your creativity. So you want to go out and present your work and be engaged. In the COVID climate, conferences are kind of difficult right now, and people know this, but there are virtual conferences. Go to those if you can. It's actually easier to go to those because you don't have to get on a plane and miss days of regular work. You can log in between experiments, in between meetings, and they're cheaper too. So you might be able to fit even more of those in, present more, take advantage of those opportunities. Part of this conference attending, though, is going to the social events and talking to people beyond just presenting your own work. Because they are looking for colleagues when they're hiring. They're not just looking for somebody who's really smart. They want somebody who's really smart and does good work, but they also want to have somebody who's going to make a good addition to their department. And so there's all of these non-cognitive skills, these non-cognitive ideas that they're looking for as what makes a good partner for the long run for their university. They want to give you tenure eventually. They want to hire the next tenured person in their department. They're not looking to hire a person who they're going to fire 3 years down the line and not give tenure. They're looking for somebody who they want to have in the long term. And part of that means they're looking for how nice are you? Like, will they get to know you? Will they like you? Are you friendly? And that kind of thing can't come about and come off very well from just your presentations of papers. They need to talk to you a little bit and see your character. And vice versa. You don't want to go get a job with people who you're not going to like and fit in with. So there's that social element of academia, which is not something you can really be taught. You just have to go out there and kind of get used to it and interact with people. And that can be one of the hardest things, I think, with PhD students and with postdocs, I think, is kind of breaking out of that shell and kind of standing as who you are for the job market. Something easy within Texas that may be possible even with COVID, depending upon different universities' policies, and especially once COVID kind of is calming down and we are getting back into interacting with people on a more regular basis, is the idea that we have a lot of universities right around us here at Baylor. We're very centrally located. You're an hour and a half from A&M, UT, SMU, UNT, all kinds of schools. It's very unique. None of those other schools are an hour and a half from everybody else, but we are. So take a look at some of the websites of your department at these other schools and see what their seminar series looks like. See what their workshops look like. And if there's interesting people, or even if there's not interesting people, it may be worth your while to take a drive and go and attend some of their workshops and seminars if it fits in with your postdoc work schedule. Because there's lots of nice people, lots of intelligent people, good people that maybe Baylor's not bringing to do a talk that is work that is relevant for what you're doing. And you can do that kind of networking in a smaller environment. Conferences are big, workshops, seminars are small. And it's a way for you to branch out and network more than your Baylor community you have right here. So talk to your mentor, find out if it's okay and if they're game for it, and then maybe go and visit some of these other schools. Email the seminar coordinator, say, hey, I'm such and such postdoc at Baylor. I'd love to come to this workshop that you have on your website. Is it open to people outside of your faculty? Most likely they'll say yes. And they'll be excited to have people. I organize seminars at Baylor for the econ department, and I like to have people show up. And sometimes you have to drag people into the seminars, and it's nice when people want to come and be engaged. And you may get to chat with these faculty members from other universities, and your next job may come from one of these seminars. You never know. So take advantage of that. So those are a couple of the big things. Stay organized. Don't get sloppy. Stay organized. Make a spreadsheet. I have a spreadsheet of every paper I've ever submitted, every rejection I've ever received, every acceptance I've ever had. And it's a little daunting, but that organization I find is very helpful. And you're early in your career. It's much harder to start one of those later in your career. So start early on that. Especially important there is to keep a list of your ideas for future projects and who you've talked about it with, because academics can be territorial. And if you come up with a great idea at a conference with somebody, and then you do that project with somebody else, you might burn bridges, and you don't want to do that. So if you stay organized, Excel can be your friend, and just like new idea, who did I talk about this with? And it's easy, and that holds it together. And then when you're looking for like, what is my next project going to be? You have that right there for you. Be ambitious. Every project you work on, you're interested in. So don't sell short your ideas and your papers. I try to aim high with everything I do. Even though most things don't land in the top 5 journal, be ambitious. Like if you're interested in it and you're dedicated to it, there's other people who probably are as well. And there's somewhat of a randomness of journals. So be willing to shoot high. Your advisors are probably pretty ambitious and good because they have been able to get money for postdocs, and that takes a competitive process. So they're probably hoping their projects will land up really high as well. And you need to have that ambition too, and demonstrate it and get used to the idea that you will take these risks to shoot high. But then I wouldn't recommend letting papers that don't succeed initially, don't let them just fall away. It's I'm happy having papers land at good field journals. That's a wonderful thing as well. So aim high, be happy with a good field. It's kind of how I approach my own work. Every field's a little different, but be strong and be proud of the stuff you're working on. So that's just kind of a brief overview of my kind of motivational spiel here, and some thoughts. I don't know, your mentors probably have talked to you about some of these things, but that's from my perspective. Happy to answer questions or talk further about a lot of these things if you're interested. So I probably would have expected going into my postdoc that I would do a lot more work with my postdoc mentor after my postdoc, and I wound up not doing, I had 1 or 2 projects I've done with him afterwards, but I do a lot more work ongoing with other people I met at Virginia Tech where I did my postdoc than I do with my advisor when I was at Virginia Tech. So I've developed a really good co-author relationship with a faculty member who was in a different department than I was in, but our work overlapped a lot. And that's turned into a really good relationship. So if I hadn't like kind of gone out of my little narrow lab zone, that connection may not have been made at all. And I wasn't really expecting that when I went into it. So that's one big thing. And my field is kind of, I have gone in a completely different route in my research than I was at when I went into my postdoc. So I was doing MRI scans, economic decision making when I went into my postdoc. And I haven't really done any of that since I left. So I was very flexible in the trajectory I was taking, and I just, research leads to where research leads. And it's not always exactly how you have that mapped out. And some of that depended upon where I got my job. So Baylor didn't have the facilities even for what I was doing when I was at Virginia Tech. And so I just kind of adapted, and I was co-author with people doing that kind of work for a while. And then I just used what I had, the resources I had here, and where it took me. So being flexible, you can't underestimate the importance of being flexible in your research path, because it's a windy world out there, and we get blown in a lot of directions, and there's a lot of interesting questions. So I think every field is a little bit different, so I'll qualify my answer with that. Though I think a pretty universal thing is, if you could go, when you're on the job market, if you say, I have experience applying for funding, and I'm not afraid to ask, right? And a lot of universities don't have a lot of money, and y'all are going to be kind of going into a world where universities are a little bit scared, especially people going on the market this year or next year, and they're going to be concerned about money. So if you can show that, like, even if you don't get a grant, if you've applied for money, that's a good signal. And it's like, it shows that ambition, which universities want people who are ambitious. They don't want somebody who's just going to get hired and sit back and not do very much. They're looking for people who are going to work hard. And showing that you are willing to go out and apply for grants is a very good signal. And people, I've known people, one of my co-authors who was a graduate student when I was a postdoc, and I do work with her currently, just got a big NIH R1, and as a postdoc, and she's going into a new job with an R1 under her belt. That's going to help her get a job, because then you come in and you're like, I have funding. Even if you don't have funding as a university, I have funding. I know how to apply for funding. I'm not afraid to look for funding elsewhere. And some disciplines that's a requirement. If you're a chemist, I imagine if you're not out there looking for grants, a university might not even pay you because they're going to be on soft money. I don't know how social work works as far as soft money versus hard money for faculty salaries. But if you come in and you say, I have money for research, that's going to put you a step ahead of everybody who doesn't have funding. So there's very few scenarios where having grant exposure and experience, even if it's small, even if you don't have a $1 million grant, having a $20,000 grant, a $10,000 grant, is still a good signal that you go out and you ask. So I think one important thing that can get lost in the mix pretty easily, so there's a lot of things that are kind of obvious. Like you want people who are smart, who have good papers, good publications, that are intelligent, like that, kind of take that as a given. There's a lot of these things that don't come out on somebody's CV, that don't come out from looking at like where they've published and what their topics are, or even reading their papers. But it's how good people are at writing, and the collaborative process. Because everybody's a little bit different. There are some people who do all of their work at night and they don't work in the day. There are people who do all their work in the day and they don't work at night. Or there are people who take weekends off, and there are people who don't take weekends off. And those things sound a little bit innocuous, but you need to figure out what type of person you are. And when you're creating a team, especially if you have interacted with people for a while, like, so you're looking around at the other postdocs in your lab, those might be your collaborators of the future, even more so than your mentor. And you need to think, who would I best work with in the long run? So whenever I go land at a position far away at a different university, who is that person you want to do Zoom calls with? Who has the type of work strategy that you have? Because there's some strategies that don't work well together. There are some people who work on one project alone, they take it to completion, then they pick up another project and they move on. If you're a person that wants to have 3 or 4 projects that you move along together, it'll be very frustrating if the person you try to work with is only interested in a single project, because then they might get mad at you if you are spending your attention onto something else and ignoring them for a little while. Or vice versa. If you're a person who really wants to like put 100% of effort on one project and you try to work with people who have divided attention, then you would have conflicts, and that can be very bad for a healthy team. So you need to make sure your team meshes as far as their work mentality. And that's an okay question to ask people when you're hiring or when you're collaborating with them. It's something to learn about at conferences. If you're interacting with people and you're like, hey, I think this person might be good. It's something you could even bring up when you're looking for a job and you're talking to somebody. Maybe there's a team that's hiring and they're like, we have a new lab and we have funding for 5 positions. Look at those people, try to figure out, are those people, what type of person are they? And maybe you can even let into conversations that like, hey, I know your strategy seems to be very similar to my strategy. I see you have 10 working papers right now, and ask questions like, how do you manage that? I tend to be the same way. I'm always curious about how people manage it. And those kind of informal questions are good signals about your seriousness as an academic or somebody going into industry, that you are looking at things beyond just the most obvious signals.
Dr. Aimone, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and thank you to everyone else who joined us. Stacy dropped a link in the chat to our postdoc website with all the resources that we have there. So please take a look at those materials, and if you have any questions, we're always here to help, so please feel free to get in touch. Thank you again to everyone, and with that, we'll go ahead and close. Hope everyone has a great rest of your afternoon. Take care.